She arrived at the courthouse holding a newborn in one arm and a folder of divorce papers in the other, wearing the same white dress her husband once called too simple for a billionaire's wife. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, strangers stared. And across the marble hallway, her husband sat smiling beside his mistress. The woman who had stolen her home, her marriage, and her name leaned against him like a queen beside a throne, dressed in diamonds bought with the money he had sworn belonged to his family. The billionaire did not even stand when his wife walked in. He only looked at the baby, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I hope you're not planning to claim that child is mine." The hallway fell silent. His wife did not cry. She had already cried enough in the hospital room where he never came. She had cried when his lawyers froze her accounts. She had cried when his mistress sent a message saying, "By tomorrow, you and your baby will be nobody." Now she simply held her daughter closer and walked forward. But before she could enter the courtroom, laughter erupted near the entrance. A homeless boy, barefoot and wrapped in a torn jacket, had slipped past security. The billionaire's mistress covered her nose in disgust. The guards rushed toward him. People mocked him. Someone called him trash. Someone else told him this was not a shelter. Then the boy pointed at the billionaire. "You shouldn't be laughing," he said. "I know what you did." The billionaire's face changed. Not much, just enough. The wife noticed. The mistress noticed too. Everyone expected security to drag the boy away, but he reached into his jacket and pulled out a cracked phone, an old hospital bracelet, and a black flash drive. The billionaire stood so fast, his chair scraped against the floor. "Take that from him," he shouted. And that was the mistake that destroyed him. Because in that single desperate command, every reporter turned their camera toward the boy. Every lawyer in the hallway stopped moving. Every whisper died. The homeless boy looked at the abandoned wife, then at the newborn sleeping in her arms. "He paid them to switch the records," the boy said. "He paid them to erase the baby. He paid them to make her look unfaithful, but he forgot one thing." The boy lifted the flash drive. "My mother cleaned his office before she died. She saved everything." The mistress stepped back. The billionaire went pale. And the wife, who had walked into that courthouse prepared to lose her marriage, her name, and the future of her child, suddenly realized the divorce was no longer the biggest story in the room. Because the boy everyone mocked had not come to beg. He had come to bury an empire. And before the judge ever called their case, the billionaire who thought he owned everyone was about to discover what happens when the poorest person in the room holds the richest man's darkest secret. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nora Blackwell could hear only the soft breathing of her newborn daughter against her chest and the faint mechanical hum of the courthouse lights above them. Her baby, Myra, slept through it all, wrapped in a pale yellow blanket with tiny embroidered stars, unaware that her life had just become evidence. The guards hesitated. That was the first crack. All morning they had moved like men trained to obey expensive suits. They had cleared a path for Victor Blackwell. They had opened doors for his mistress, Celeste Marrow. They had blocked cameras from getting too close to him. But now, with a barefoot boy holding a flash drive and the billionaire shouting like a frightened man, the guards suddenly looked less certain. Nora looked at the boy. He could not have been more than 13, maybe 14. His face was thin, his dark hair too long over his eyes, his jacket torn at one sleeve. He held the flash drive so tightly that his knuckles had turned pale, yet he stood straighter than most of the adults in the hallway. Victor pointed a shaking finger at him. "That child is lying." The boy's eyes never left him. "Then why are you scared?" A ripple passed through the crowd. Celeste, who had entered the courthouse like she was attending a gala, no longer looked amused. Her red lips parted slightly. One hand rose to the diamond necklace at her throat, the same necklace Nora had seen in a bank statement 3 weeks after Victor claimed their marriage account had been locked for legal review. Victor turned to his lawyer, Lionel Greer. Do something. Greer was famous for doing things. He made scandals disappear. He made witnesses forget. He made judges wait. He had the smooth face of a man who never raised his voice because money had always done it for him. But even Greer looked unsettled as the reporters lifted their cameras higher. "Your Honor," Greer called toward the courtroom doors, though the judge had not yet appeared. "This is an obvious publicity stunt." The doors opened. Judge Evelyn Morrow stepped out in her black robe, silver hair pinned neatly above a face that could silence a room without speaking. She looked first at Victor, then at Nora, then at the homeless boy whose entire body seemed ready to run except for his eyes. "What is going on in my hallway?" she asked. The boy swallowed. Nora felt something twist inside her, not fear exactly, but recognition. She knew that look. She had worn it for the past year. It was the look of someone who had been dismissed for so long that standing up felt like a crime. Before Victor could answer, Nora stepped forward. "I think," she said, her voice quieter than she expected, "this boy has evidence connected to my case." Victor laughed once. It sounded wrong, too sharp, too loud. "Nora," he said, using her name like a warning, "do not embarrass yourself further." She looked at the man she had once loved, the man she had once believed could quiet a room because he was brilliant, not because he owned everyone in it. "I stopped being embarrassed the day you left me alone in a hospital room," she said. The reporters caught every word. Victor's jaw tightened. Judge Morrow turned to the boy. "What is your name?" He looked at Nora before answering. "Theo Reyes." "And how did you get that item?" the judge asked. "My mother gave it to me before she died," Theo said. His voice shook, but it did not break. "She told me if anything happened to her, I had to find Mrs. Blackwell. She said not to go to police first because he had police friends, not to go to news first because he had news friends. She said to find the mother with the baby." Nora's arms tightened around Myra. The mother with the baby. She remembered something then. Not a full memory at first, just a smell, lemon disinfectant, hospital sheets, rain tapping against a window, a woman in a grey cleaning uniform pausing at the door of Nora's room at St. Aurelia Medical Center. Nora had been half asleep, exhausted after delivery, feverish with loneliness. The woman had looked at Myra in the bassinet and whispered, "God protect that child." Nora had thought it was kindness from a stranger. Now Theo stood before her with the same eyes. Judge Morrow's expression hardened with interest. "Bailiff, bring the boy inside. No one touches that drive except court personnel. Mrs. Blackwell, you and the infant may enter. Mr. Blackwell, counsel, Ms. Morrow, inside. Everyone else remains out here." "No," Victor snapped. The judge turned slowly. "Excuse me." Victor seemed to remember where he was. He straightened his jacket, the mask sliding back into place. "Your Honor, I only mean this is highly irregular. We cannot allow some street child to derail a private family matter." Theo flinched at street child. Nora saw it. So did the judge. "Mr. Blackwell," Judge Morrow said, "nothing about a hallway full of reporters suggests this matter is private. Inside, now." The courtroom swallowed them in tense silence. Nora sat at the table beside her attorney, Mara Venn, who had taken her case even after 3 other lawyers backed away. Mara was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a calm voice that made powerful people underestimate her. When Nora first visited her office, Mara had looked at the frozen bank notices, the threatening letters, the altered hospital forms, and the fake gossip articles claiming Nora had been seen with an unnamed man. Then Mara had said, "Your husband is not trying to divorce you, he is trying to erase you." At the time, Nora thought it sounded dramatic. Now she understood it had been a diagnosis. Theo sat near the front, guarded by the bailiff, but not restrained. He kept the cracked phone in both hands while the flash drive sat sealed in an evidence envelope on the judge's bench. The old hospital bracelet had been placed beside it. Nora tried not to stare at the bracelet. But she could see enough. St. Aurelia Medical Center. Female infant. The date was Myra's birthday. Her throat tightened. Victor sat across from her, Celeste beside him, though she had moved a few inches away. It was a small distance, but Nora noticed. Celeste had always been talented at choosing where to stand. At charity events, she stood near cameras. At dinner parties, she stood near donors. In Nora's marriage, she had stood exactly where the wound would hurt most. But now Celeste looked at Victor, as if seeing a stranger behind the beautiful suit. Judge Morrow folded her hands. Mr. Reyes, you will tell this court how you came into possession of these items. Theo looked down. My mother worked nights cleaning offices. Before that, she worked at St. Aurelia in records, but she got fired. Why? Myra asked gently. Theo's mouth tightened, because she wouldn't sign something. Greer rose. Objection. This is hearsay from a minor who clearly. Sit down, Mr. Greer, Judge Morrow said. Greer sat. Theo continued. My mom said Mr. Blackwell's people came to the hospital before Mrs. Blackwell had the baby. They wanted access to patient records. My mom wasn't important, that's what they thought. She was just cleaning and filing. People talked around her. Nora's mind slipped backward again. Victor had been different during the pregnancy. At first, when she told him, he had kissed her forehead and said, "An heir changes everything." Not a child, an heir. She had ignored the word because she wanted Joy so badly. Their marriage had already become a house full of locked rooms. Victor traveled constantly. His assistant answered his personal phone. Celeste appeared at more and more events, first as a consultant, then as a close friend of the family, then as the woman who knew Victor's schedule better than his wife did. But when Nora became pregnant, Victor returned home with flowers. He touched her stomach in front of photographers. He announced a new children's health initiative through the Blackwell Foundation. He placed his hand over hers at galas and smiled like a man building a future. Then, in her 7th month, something changed. She found him one night in his study, staring at an old leather folder with a brass clasp. When she stepped inside, he closed it too quickly. "What is that?" she asked. "Company history," he said. "Since when does company history make you look afraid?" He smiled then, the same smile he wore in court now. "You read too many novels, Nora." She saw the folder only once more. The day after Myra was born, when she woke to find Victor's lawyer at her bedside instead of her husband, the folder was on the chair beside him. Lionel Greer had not congratulated her. He had handed her papers and said Victor was filing for divorce based on infidelity, reputational damage, and suspected fraud against marital assets. Nora, weak and stunned, had whispered, "Where is my husband?" Greer had looked at the newborn in the bassinet. Protecting himself. Now in the courtroom, Theo said, "My mother said the baby was born and then the records changed. Blood type, birth notes, the father's information, security footage went missing. A nurse who asked questions was transferred." Victor leaned toward Greer. "End this." But there was no ending it, not yet. Judge Morrow gestured to the evidence envelope and the flash drive. Theo's eyes filled with something harder than sadness. "My mother cleaned Mr. Blackwell's private office 2 weeks after she was fired from the hospital. She wasn't supposed to be on that floor, but another woman got sick, so they sent her. She heard voices, Mr. Blackwell and a woman." Celeste went still. Theo looked at her. "I think it was you." Celeste's face lost color beneath her makeup. "That is absurd," Victor said. Theo lifted the cracked phone. "There's audio on here too. My mom recorded some because she was scared." Greer stood again. "Your Honor, any illegally obtained recording." Mara rose smoothly. "Your Honor, before counsel gives a lecture about legality, I would like the court to note that my client has alleged coercion, fraud, financial abuse, and evidence tampering for weeks. Mr. Greer called those allegations delusional in his last filing. A minor has now arrived with physical items matching my client's hospital stay." Judge Morrow looked at Greer. "I am aware." Nora looked down at Myra. Her daughter's tiny fist had opened against her chest, a perfect, helpless hand. When Nora was little, her father used to tell her, "If you ever want to know what a man worships, watch what he protects when the room catches fire." Gabriel Hart had been an inventor, a gentle man with ink on his fingers and impossible ideas stacked in notebooks. He had built security systems out of spare parts in their garage. He had believed technology should protect ordinary people from powerful ones. Nora remembered him at the kitchen table, drawing diagrams while she colored beside him. Then Victor Blackwell came into their lives. Back then, Victor had not been a billionaire. He had been brilliant, polished, hungry. He arrived at Gabriel's workshop wearing a suit too expensive for the neighborhood and a smile that made Nora's mother bring out the good cups. Nora was 17. Victor was 28. He called Gabriel a genius. He promised investment. He promised patents. He promised to make the world safer. 6 months later, Gabriel's company collapsed. 1 year later, Victor launched Blackwell Sentinel, the security platform that turned him from ambitious entrepreneur into one of the richest men in the country. 2 years later, Gabriel died believing he had failed. Nora had never connected the grief of her childhood to the coldness of her marriage. Pain, she had learned, often separated itself into rooms. You did not always realize the same man held the keys. Judge Morrow ordered a brief recess to review the items privately with technical staff. The courtroom emptied into controlled chaos. Reporters shouted questions from behind the corridor barrier. Victor's team formed around him like a wall of black suits. Nora remained seated. Her knees felt unsteady, and she did not trust herself to stand while holding Myra. Theo hovered near the bench until the bailiff told him to sit. Nora turned toward him. "Theo," she said softly. He looked ready to bolt. "Was your mother's name Rosa?" His eyes widened. "You remember her?" "Not enough," Nora said, "but I remember she looked at my baby like she wanted to tell me something." Theo nodded, his mouth trembling for the first time. "She tried. She went back to the hospital to find you, but you were gone. They told her you checked out. Then men came to our room and told her to stop asking questions." Nora's stomach went cold. Mara leaned closer. "What men?" Theo shook his head. "I don't know. Nice coats, clean shoes, the kind who don't look at people like us unless they want us scared." Nora knew that kind. For 3 years, she had been married to their king. Victor Blackwell had not always been cruel in obvious ways. That was what made him dangerous. He did not shout at first. He corrected. He did not forbid. He suggested. He did not isolate her. He filled her life with obligations until she had no time for anyone who remembered who she had been before him. When Nora wanted to continue teaching art at the community center, Victor said, "My wife should think bigger." When she wore simple dresses, he sent stylists. When she visited her mother's old friends, he arranged charity luncheons on the same afternoons. When she questioned company decisions, he kissed her hand and said, "Leave the ugly parts to me." At first, she mistook control for care because it came wrapped in silk. By the time she recognized the cage, everyone else called it a palace. Theo sat beside her now, staring at Myra. "She's smaller than I thought," he said. "She was early," Nora replied. "Because of what happened." Nora looked at him. Theo's face twisted with guilt, as if he had said too much. "What do you know?" Nora asked. He reached into his jacket again. The bailiff stiffened, but Theo only pulled out a folded paper, worn soft from being opened many times. "My mom wrote things down, dates, names. She said rich people make paper disappear, so poor people have to make copies of everything." He handed it to Nora. The handwriting was neat but rushed. Nora saw names, hospital administrators, Victor's private physician, a laboratory, a law firm, a wire transfer, then a line underlined 3 times. "Baby must be declared illegitimate before trust audit." Nora stared at the words until they blurred. Trust audit. Mara read over her shoulder and went very still. Nora, did Victor ever mention a trust tied to the birth of a child? No, Nora said. But memory answered for her. Victor in the nursery doorway, weeks before Myra's birth, speaking on the phone in a low voice. The Hartwell clause is not enforceable if paternity is disputed. Then delay the audit. I don't care what it costs. Nora had thought Hartwell meant nothing to him anymore. It was her maiden name, a relic he barely used, except when charming her father's old friends at fundraisers. She had not understood why her family name sounded like a threat in his mouth. Mara's eyes sharpened. Your father's company, did any assets transfer into Blackwell Holdings after his death? I don't know, Nora said. I was young. My mother handled what she could, but everything was buried in lawsuits. Did your father have partners? Nora looked across the room at Victor. He was watching them now. Not smugly. Carefully. The kind of careful that meant he was counting exits. My father had one partner, Nora said. Victor. Mara breathed out slowly. Then this is bigger than the divorce. Across the aisle, Celeste rose and whispered something to Victor. He grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to alarm the room, but hard enough that Nora saw her wince. Celeste pulled free. For the first time since Nora had known her, Celeste looked less like an enemy and more like a woman realizing she had chosen the wrong throne. The court reconvened after 47 minutes. Nora knew because she counted everyone. Judge Morrow returned with an expression that made Lionel Greer stop whispering mid-sentence. The sealed envelope remained on her bench, but the flash drive had clearly been opened. A court technology officer stood near the clerk, holding printed pages. Before we proceed, Judge Morrow said, I am ordering all parties not to leave this jurisdiction pending further review. I am also referring certain materials to the district attorney's office. A sound moved through the room like wind. Victor stood. On what basis? Judge Morrow looked down at him. Sit down. He did not. For a moment, the mask fell away completely. Nora saw not the billionaire from magazine covers, not the generous donor, not the husband who once danced with her under museum lights. She saw a boy who had grown into a man without ever learning that no meant no. Judge Morrow repeated, Sit down, Mr. Blackwell. This time he did. The materials presented by Mr. Reyes, she continued, appear to contain recordings, financial documents, hospital correspondence, and communications relevant to allegations already before this court. Their authenticity is not yet fully determined. However, they are substantial enough to affect custody, financial restraint, and the credibility of prior representations made by counsel. Greer's mouth tightened. Your Honor, my client has not had an opportunity. Your client had ample opportunity to avoid shouting, take that from him, in front of reporters, the judge said. Even Mara looked down to hide the smallest smile. Judge Morrow turned to Nora. Mrs. Blackwell, temporary financial restrictions placed on your personal accounts are lifted effective immediately. Mr. Blackwell is restrained from disposing of marital assets, trust assets, or assets connected to Hartwell security systems pending emergency review. Victor went pale again. Not at the mention of marital assets. At Hartwell. There it was. Nora felt the name move through her like a bell struck after years of silence. Hartwell Security Systems had been her father's dream. It had once existed in a garage, in notebooks, in prototypes made from wires and stubborn hope. Victor had told Nora the company died because Gabriel lacked business sense. He said it kindly, sadly, as if mourning with her. But Victor had built his empire on a platform that did exactly what Gabriel's old diagrams promised. Nora had noticed similarities years ago. A logo shape, a phrase in a patent description, an algorithm name that sounded like one from her father's notebooks. When she asked Victor, he smiled and said, Great minds think alike. She had believed him, because the alternative would have meant admitting her husband had courted her grief before he courted her. Judge Morrow continued, "A guardian ad litem will be appointed for the infant. An independent paternity test will be ordered through a court-approved lab. Mr. Blackwell will have no unsupervised contact with the child until further order." Victor's head snapped up. "That child is not mine." Myra stirred. Nora stood slowly, holding her daughter close. "Then why did you pay so much to erase her?" she asked. The room went silent again. Victor had no answer. Not one he could say in public. The hearing ended with orders, signatures, warnings, and the kind of legal language that made destruction sound polite. But outside the courthouse, the world had already caught fire. By evening, every screen in the city carried the same image. Victor Blackwell rising from his chair, face twisted, shouting at guards to take evidence from a barefoot boy. The clip had no context at first. It did not need any. Powerful men were often destroyed not by full truth, but by the 1 second when their mask slipped and confirmed what everyone had suspected. Blackwell Holdings released a statement calling the allegations baseless and malicious. Victor's personal spokesperson called Theo an exploited minor. Anonymous sources claimed Nora had staged the scene out of desperation. A celebrity gossip site published old photos of Nora speaking to male charity volunteers, framing them as suspicious. But this time, something had changed. People had seen the boy. They had seen the baby. They had seen Victor panic. And panic, once public, is hard to rebrand as dignity. That night, Nora did not return to the mansion. She went to Mara's brownstone office, where the conference room became a temporary nursery. Myra slept in a borrowed travel bassinet, while Theo sat near the window, eating soup too carefully, as if afraid someone might take it back. Mara's assistant brought him socks. He stared at them for a long time before putting them on. Nora pretended not to notice. Kindness, she had learned, sometimes needed privacy. Mara spread Rosa Reyes' papers across the table. There were photocopies of hospital forms, staff schedules, a list of security badge numbers, and a photograph of a cleaning cart parked outside Victor's private office. There were handwritten notes about payments made through shell companies. There were names of people Nora recognized from Victor's world. And there was one old photograph Nora did not expect. Her father. Gabriel Hart stood outside his workshop 20 years earlier, smiling with one arm around a younger Victor Blackwell. Between them was a woman in a navy cardigan holding a clipboard. Rosa Reyes. Nora touched the photograph. Theo looked over. "That's my mom before I was born. She knew my father." Theo nodded. She worked for him, office assistant, bookkeeping sometimes. She said he treated her like she mattered. Nora closed her eyes. There it was, another door opening in the past. She remembered Rosa now, not clearly, but in fragments. A woman bringing lemonade to the workshop. A woman laughing when Nora spilled glitter on blueprints. A woman telling Gabriel that Victor's numbers did not add up. Victor's numbers did not add up. Nora had been a teenager, more interested in art school applications than corporate paperwork, but the memory returned with painful clarity. Rosa standing in the kitchen doorway, voice low, "Mr. Hart, I don't like the transfer language. It gives him too much control." Gabriel had rubbed his tired eyes. "Victor says investors require it. And you trust him." Gabriel had looked toward the garage, where Victor was helping Nora fix a broken projector for her school presentation. "He saved us," Gabriel said. Rosa had not answered. She had only looked unconvinced. Nora opened her eyes. "Your mother warned my father." "She warned everybody," Theo said. "Nobody listened because she cleaned floors after that. People think your words stop counting when your job changes." Nora felt shame burn through her. Not because she had mocked Theo in the hallway. She had not. but because she had lived years in Victor's world without asking, who became invisible so people like him could remain untouchable. Mara inserted the flash drive into an offline laptop prepared by her investigator. The court made a copy. This is the original. Theo nodded. There's a password. Mara looked at him. Do you know it? My mom said Mrs. Blackwell would. Nora frowned. Me. Theo pulled a small envelope from inside the folded paper. On it, in Rosa's handwriting, were 4 words. Ask Gabriel's little bird. Nora's breath caught. Little bird. No one had called her that since her father died. Gabriel used to whistle when he worked, off-key and cheerful. Nora would sit on a stool beside him, swinging her legs, asking endless questions when she understood something quickly. He would tap her nose with a pencil and say, "That's my little bird," always finding the open window. What open window? She once asked. The one powerful men forget to lock, he said. At the time, she only laughed. Now, 20 years later, the memory had teeth. Nora reached for the keyboard. There were obvious passwords: Little Bird, Gabriel, Hartwell, Myra. None worked. Then she remembered the last project her father worked on before everything collapsed. He had named it after Nora's favorite flower because she used to plant them in chipped mugs along the workshop windowsill. Marigold. She typed it. The folder opened. Mara whispered, "Good Lord." The flash drive contained hundreds of files, carefully arranged. Some were scanned contracts from Hartwell Security Systems. Some were emails between Victor and investors discussing acquisition of distressed intellectual property. Some were recordings marked with dates. There were hospital files from St. Aurelia. There were lab invoices. There were photographs of signed documents. And there was a video file labeled for Nora Hartwell. Nora stared at it. Her hands went cold. Mara touched her arm. "You don't have to watch it tonight." "Yes," Nora said, "I do." The video opened with static, then her father's face appeared. Older than she remembered him, thinner, exhausted, sitting in the workshop under a single lamp. His hair was messy, his glasses sat crooked, but his eyes were the same. Nora covered her mouth. "My little bird," Gabriel said on the screen, voice rough but steady. "If you are watching this, then I failed to stop him in time." Theo lowered his eyes. Mara turned away slightly, giving Nora the dignity of grief without making her feel alone in it. Gabriel continued, "Victor has taken control of the company accounts. I signed documents I did not fully understand because I trusted him and because I thought desperation was the same thing as partnership. Rosa warned me. I should have listened." Nora's tears came silently. "I have placed what evidence I could gather with Rosa Reyes. She is braver than I have been. If anything happens to me, find her. And Nora, listen carefully. Victor is not just stealing a company. He is stealing the thing your mother and I built for you. Hartwell Security was placed under Family Protection Trust before Victor arrived. Any direct descendant of yours has a claim to the restored assets if fraud is proven." Mara leaned forward. Gabriel looked into the camera as if reaching across years. "That means if you ever have a child, Victor may try to control that child, deny that child, or use that child. Do not let him. The trust was designed to protect our family from predators. I never imagined the predator would sit at our table." The video paused briefly, glitching. Then Gabriel smiled sadly. "You were always better at seeing beauty than danger. I loved that about you, but when beauty is surrounded by wolves, it must learn teeth." Nora pressed a hand to Myra's blanket. The video ended. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Theo said, "My mom said he made your dad look careless. She kept trying to prove he was." Nora looked at the boy, this child who had carried a dead woman's courage through cold streets and courthouse laughter. "Your mother protected my family," Nora said. Theo's eyes shone. "She said your father protected ours first." "How?" "When my mom was pregnant with me, She almost lost her job because she missed shifts. Your dad kept paying her anyway, said Barbies shouldn't start life punished for grown-up problems. Nora looked at Myra. The room blurred again. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Rain began tapping against the windows, the same rhythm she remembered from the hospital room. Nora had once thought the worst night of her life was the night Victor did not come. But now she understood that night had not been an ending. It had been the moment an old war returned wearing a newborn's face. Victor did not sleep that night. At 3 in the morning, he stood on the top floor of Blackwell Tower, watching news helicopters blink beyond the glass. The city looked smaller from up there. For years, that had comforted him. Tiny cars, tiny people, tiny problems. Every light below him belonged in some way to a system he could buy, influence, pressure, or break. But now the city looked like 1,000 eyes. Behind him, Celeste poured whiskey she did not drink. You told me the wife was handled, she said. Victor did not turn, she was. She walked into court with a baby and walked out with your assets frozen. She walked out with temporary sympathy. Celeste laughed without humor. Do not insult me. I built half your public image. I know the difference between sympathy and collapse. Victor turned then. You built what I paid you to build. And what did Rosa Reyes build? Celeste asked. His silence answered. Celeste's fingers tightened around the glass. How much of it is true? Victor smiled faintly. Truth is not the question, proof is. That boy has proof. That boy has stolen files carried by a vagrant mother and protected by a sentimental wife. My lawyers will shred it. You shouted in front of cameras. His face hardened because you froze. Celeste stared at him. Me. You should have taken the drive. You were closer. The room changed. Celeste had ignored many things to become Victor's chosen woman. She ignored the way he spoke about Nora's softness like it was a defect. She ignored the staff who went silent when he entered a room. She ignored the wives of executives who warned her with their eyes. She told herself powerful men were always ruthless, and she preferred ruthlessness in her favor. But now she understood a rule she had been too arrogant to learn earlier. A man who humiliates one woman for you will eventually humiliate you for himself. Victor walked closer. Listen carefully. If your name appears anywhere in those recordings, you were manipulated by Nora. You were emotional, jealous, unstable. You misunderstood. Celeste set the glass down. Are you threatening me? I am reminding you who made you visible. Her smile was small and bitter. No, Victor, you are reminding me who made Rosa invisible. For the first time that night, he looked genuinely surprised. Celeste walked toward the door. Where are you going? To sleep somewhere your cameras aren't watching. If you leave now, you leave with nothing. She paused. Nora had heard similar words once. Celeste, at last, heard them for what they were. Then I suppose I'll find out what I am without your money, she said. The door closed behind her. Victor stood alone in his glass kingdom, and for the first time in years, the silence did not obey him. By morning, Blackwell Holdings had lost $11 billion in market value. By noon, 2 board members resigned. By evening, St. Aurelia Medical Center announced an independent investigation into serious allegations involving patient record irregularities. The phrasing was careful, sterile, and devastating. Nora watched the headlines from Mara's office while Myra slept, and Theo pretended not to watch her watching them. Does he go to jail? Theo asked. Mara, who was reviewing court filings, looked up. That depends on prosecutors, evidence, and a lot of ugly process. Theo frowned. So maybe no. So maybe not quickly, Mara said, but losing power is sometimes the first sentence. Nora looked at the screen. Victor's face stared back from a dozen articles, each one using a photo chosen to make him look either commanding or sinister. She felt no satisfaction yet, only exhaustion. For years she had imagined justice as a clean moment, a door opening, a villain exposed, applause, freedom. But real justice arrived messy. It came with legal bills, crying Barbies, frightened witnesses, and boys who ate soup like they did not trust hunger to stay gone. Nora stood and went to Theo. "Where did you sleep before coming to court?" she asked. He shrugged. "Different places." "That is not an answer. It's the only one I have." Mara looked at Nora, then at Theo. "We can contact child services and request emergency protective placement. Given his role as a witness, we can ask for safeguards." Theo's face closed. "No." Nora sat beside him. "Theo." "No," he repeated. "Systems lose people. My mom said that." Nora could not promise him the world was safe. It was. She could not promise every adult meant well. They didn't. So she told him the truth. "Then we will not let you enter it alone." His eyes searched hers, suspicious of kindness again. "Why?" he asked. "Because your mother saved my daughter. Because my father trusted yours. Because everyone watched them mock you, and I did not stop it fast enough. Because I know what it feels like when the world believes the richest liar in the room." Nora said only, "Because you came for me." Theo looked away. But he did not leave. The next week unfolded like a storm refusing to pass. The court-approved paternity test confirmed what Nora had known from the moment Victor looked at Myra and saw danger instead of innocence. Myra was his child. The result arrived on a rainy Thursday. Nora read the report in Mara's office and felt nothing at first. Not surprise, not relief, not even anger. The truth had always lived in her bones. Paper had simply caught up. Mara used the result to file emergency motions tied to the Hartwell family trust. The trust, buried under decades of corporate manipulation, contained a clause that had seemed sentimental when Gabriel created it. Any future child of Nora's line would trigger an automatic review of company assets if Hartwell intellectual property was ever disputed. Victor had known. That was why Myra had to be erased. Not because he believed Nora had betrayed him. Because Myra's existence opened the locked door to his first theft. Meanwhile, Theo became the city's obsession. Some called him brave, some called him a pawn. Strangers offered money. Reporters camped outside Mara's office. One tabloid ran a cruel story about his mother's old debts. Nora watched Theo read the headline and fold into himself without moving. She took the tablet from his hands. "They do that when they're afraid," she said. "They're not afraid of me. They are afraid of what your mother left you." Theo looked at the rain streaking the windows. She always said she had nothing to leave. Nora sat beside him. She left the truth. He wiped his sleeve across his face quickly, angry at the evidence of tears. That night, Nora dreamed of her father's workshop. She was 17 again, sitting on the floor, painting marigolds along the side of a wooden storage box. Victor stood in the doorway, speaking softly to Gabriel. Rosa watched from behind a shelf. The air smelled like solder and coffee. In the dream, Gabriel turned to Nora and said, "Little bird, count the shadows." She looked down. Victor had too. She woke before dawn, heart pounding, Myra fussing in the bassinet beside her. "Count the shadows." The phrase stayed with her. At breakfast, she asked Mara for the old Hartwell files again. "What are you looking for?" Mara asked. "I don't know." That had become the honest answer to most of her life. She spread the documents across the table. Contracts, trust papers, patent sketches, investor letters, copies Rosa had hidden across years. Nora searched until Myra needed feeding, then searched again. Theo watched silently. Finally, he pointed to a faded scan. "That symbol," he said. It was on the corner of an old Hartwell prototype schematic, a small bird inside a shield. Nora nodded. "My father's first logo." Theo pulled the hospital bracelet from the evidence copy box. It's on here too. Nora froze. The bracelet had printed hospital information, but on the inside edge, barely visible, someone had drawn the same tiny bird in blue ink. Rosa. Nora held it up to the light. There were numbers beneath the bird. Not random, coordinates, a date, a file code. Mara called her investigator. The numbers led to a storage unit rented under Rosa Reyes's name on the edge of the city. They went that afternoon with a court officer. The unit was small, dusty, and packed with boxes wrapped in plastic. Nora expected files. She did not expect her childhood. There were her father's notebooks, his prototype shells, old photographs, a music box from Nora's 9th birthday, the wooden storage box she had painted with marigolds, and inside that box, beneath a false bottom, was the original partnership agreement between Gabriel Hart and Victor Blackwell. Not the version Victor filed. The real one. Mara read it twice, then a third time. This gives your father majority ownership of the core technology, she said. And after his death, his shares pass to you, then your descendants. Nora sat on an overturned crate. Theo stood in the doorway, watching sunlight cut through dust. My mom said the important thing wasn't on the flash drive, he said. Nora looked up. She said the flash drive would make people look, but the box would make them see. Nora touched the painted marigolds. For years she had believed her father left her grief and debt. All along he had left a map. Rosa had protected it, Victor had feared it, Myra had awakened it. That evening, Victor called Nora directly for the first time since the hospital. She answered on speaker in Mara's presence. Nora, he said, voice low and warm in the old way. The sound made her skin remember before her heart could object. That was the cruelty of having loved someone dangerous. The body kept echoes the mind had already rejected. What do you want? She asked. I want to end this circus. You started it. I made mistakes. Mara lifted an eyebrow. Nora almost laughed. Victor Blackwell did not confess, he rebranded. You framed me as unfaithful, Nora said. You froze my accounts. You denied your daughter. You tried to steal evidence from a homeless child in court. A pause. I was advised poorly. There he is, Nora said softly. What does that mean? The man who can commit any sin as long as someone else carries the blame. His voice cooled. Be careful. No. Silence. It was such a small word, one syllable, but Nora realized she had spent years walking around it like it was a locked gate. No, Victor, I will not stop teaching. No, Victor, I will not change my dress. No, Victor, I will not smile beside your mistress. No, Victor, you do not get to erase my child. She had arrived late to the word, but she arrived. Victor said, you have no idea what you are touching. I'm touching what belonged to my father. You think Gabriel was innocent? Victor asked, bitterness leaking through. He was weak, brilliant, yes, but weak. Men like him invent, men like me build. Without me, his little garage project would have died unknown. With you, he died believing he was nothing. That is not my burden. Nora felt the last thread snap. No, she said, it's your evidence. Mara's investigator, with Nora's permission, recorded the entire call. Victor realized too late. Again. The next hearing was no longer a divorce proceeding in spirit, though divorce remained on the docket. It had become a public reckoning dressed in family court procedure. This time, Nora did not wear white. She wore navy, her father's favorite color, and a small marigold pin Mara's assistant had found at a vintage shop. Myra slept against her in a sling. Theo walked beside them in clean clothes that did not quite fit yet, his new shoes stiff at the heels. He looked terrified but determined. Outside the courthouse, no one laughed at him. That seemed to frighten him more. Nora bent slightly. You do not owe anyone your face. He nodded. Or your story. He nodded again. Only the truth, when you're ready. He looked at her. My mom would have liked you. Nora swallowed hard. I wish I had known her better. She knew you, Theo said. She said you used to draw birds on everything. Nora smiled through the ache. I did. Inside, Victor arrived alone. No Celeste. No smiling mistress beside him. Just Greer and a smaller legal team than before. The board had placed Victor on temporary leave that morning. News anchors called it a stunning fall. Nora thought of her father's video and knew it was not stunning at all. It was slow truth finally becoming visible. Judge Morrow admitted the newly discovered Hartwell documents for preliminary review. Prosecutors sat in the back. A representative from the trust court observed. The hospital's counsel looked like a person wishing chairs could swallow people. Then Celeste entered. Every camera outside had been waiting for her, but inside the courtroom, her arrival produced a sharper silence. She wore black, no diamonds, no Victor. Greer stood. Your Honor, Ms. Marrow is not a party to. I am aware of who Ms. Marrow is, the judge said. Celeste walked to Mara's table and placed a small silver recorder in front of her. Victor's face changed again. There it was, the same flicker from the hallway. Not much. Just enough. Celeste did not look at Nora, not at first. I thought I was winning, she said, voice low but clear. That is not an excuse, it is a confession of stupidity. Nora said nothing. Celeste turned toward the judge. Victor told me Nora was unstable. He said the baby might not be his. He said he needed time to protect the company from scandal. I believed what benefited me. The honesty was ugly. That made it useful. Celeste continued, but I recorded meetings too, for insurance. In my world, women who stand beside powerful men learn to keep receipts. Victor rose halfway. Celeste. She looked at him then. I finally understand why Nora stopped flinching, she said. She ran out of fear. The recorder contained conversations Victor could not explain away. His voice discussing the hospital record changes. His voice instructing Greer to bleed Nora dry until she signs. His voice referring to Myra as the Hartwell trigger. His voice telling Celeste that once Nora was discredited, the trust audit would die and the founding shares could be fully absorbed before anyone dug up Gabriel's ghost. Nora sat very still. Gabriel's ghost. That was what her father had become to Victor, not a man, not a friend, a legal inconvenience from the grave. Theo listened, with his head bowed. When Rosa's name appeared on the recording, his hands clenched. Victor said on the audio, the cleaning woman is manageable, people like her vanish from relevance every day. Theo looked up. No tears this time. Only fire. The hearing lasted 6 hours. By the end, Victor Blackwell's empire had become a crime scene made of paper. The judge granted Nora temporary sole custody and use of the family residence if she wanted it. Nora did not. She requested instead that Victor be ordered to vacate the mansion until property ownership could be reviewed. The judge agreed. Victor's personal accounts connected to disputed assets were restricted. The Hartwell Trust was referred for emergency reconstruction. Prosecutors requested copies of all evidence. Then came the divorce matter itself. Greer argued that marital dissolution should be delayed. Mara stood. For months, Mr. Blackwell has attempted to accelerate this divorce to strip my client of her rights, her reputation, and her ability to protect her child. Now that evidence has surfaced implicating him, he requests patience. Mrs. Blackwell requests freedom. Judge Morrow looked at Nora. Mrs. Blackwell. Nora stood, Myra against her heart. Years earlier, at her wedding reception, Victor had taken her hand beneath crystal chandeliers and whispered, "You are safe with me now." She had believed safety meant being chosen by someone powerful. Now she knew safety meant being able to tell the truth without asking permission. "I came here today to lose quietly," Nora said. "I thought the best I could hope for was to leave with my daughter and whatever pieces of my life he did not want. But my father left me more than grief. Rosa Reyes left me more than evidence. My daughter gave me more than courage. She gave me a reason to stop confusing survival with silence." Victor stared at the table. Nora looked at Theo. And Theo reminded everyone in that hallway that truth does not become less true because it comes from someone we failed to protect. Theo's face flushed. Nora turned back to the judge. "I want the divorce. I want my name restored. I want my daughter safe. And I want every hidden thing brought into daylight." Judge Morrow nodded. "Then daylight is where we begin." The divorce was not finalized that day. Legal systems rarely move with the rhythm of stories, but Victor lost the things he valued most before any final decree. He lost control first, then credibility, then allies. Banks called loans, investors demanded answers. The board removed him permanently after the prosecutors announced formal charges related to fraud, obstruction, and evidence tampering. The Blackwell name disappeared from charitable buildings within months. His portrait came down from the hospital wing he had funded with stolen money. The mansion was no longer his sanctuary. It became part of a disputed asset review. Celeste entered a cooperation agreement. She lost status, friends, invitations, and the illusion that being chosen by a powerful man made her powerful. But she kept her freedom by telling the truth, and sometimes Nora saw her name in articles about women, ambition, and complicity. Nora did not forgive her quickly. Some wounds should not be rushed for the comfort of the person who caused them. Greer resigned from his firm after investigators found communications showing he knew more than he claimed. St. Aurelia fired administrators, referred staff for discipline, and created a patient records fund under court supervision. None of it undid the hospital room where Nora had been abandoned, but it made the lie more expensive than the truth. Theo entered protective care at first, with Nora and Mara fighting to keep him close and safe. It was not simple. He did not transform overnight into a smiling boy grateful for rescue. He hid food in drawers. He woke at small noises. He distrusted soft voices most, because soft voices had often delivered hard news. Nora learned not to ask, "Are you okay?" too often. Instead, she asked, "Do you want the window open or closed? Soup or pasta? Blue notebook or greens?" Small choices. Open windows. Unlocked rooms. Months later, when the court allowed Nora to become his legal guardian, Theo pretended the decision was merely practical. "Myra already likes me," he said. Myra, now round-cheeked and bright-eyed, grabbed his finger and shrieked with delight. Nora smiled. "That is a strong legal argument." He rolled his eyes, but he did not pull his hand away. The Hartwell Trust took nearly a year to reconstruct. Experts reviewed old code, patents, contracts, and financial trails. What emerged was both staggering and heartbreaking. Victor had not simply stolen an idea. He had stolen a future and then married the daughter of the man he robbed to keep that future under his roof. When the settlement came, headlines called Nora one of the wealthiest women in the country. She hated the phrase at first. It made the story sound like a reward, as if money had healed anything. It had not brought back Gabriel. It had not brought back Rosa. It had not restored the first weeks of Myra's life or the years Nora spent shrinking in rooms where Victor's approval decided the temperature. But money, in the right hands, could become a tool. Nora renamed Blackwell Sentinel as Hartwell Shield and converted part of the company into a public interest technology foundation. Its mission was simple: protect people who were usually ignored by systems built for the powerful. The first building she opened was the Rosa Reyes Center for Witness Protection and Family Advocacy. On opening day, Theo refused to give a speech. Nora did not make him. Instead, he stood beside her while Myra, now learning to walk, clung to the edge of Nora's dress. The building's glass doors reflected the crowd: lawyers, nurses, social workers, former patients, journalists, and people who looked like they had come in from rain even under a clear sky. Nora stepped to the microphone. She wore the marigold pin. "When I first met Rosa Reyes," she said, "I did not understand that she was trying to save my child. When my father trusted Victor Blackwell, he did not understand he was inviting betrayal into his work. When Theo walked into a courthouse with torn shoes and evidence in his hands, people laughed because they thought poverty made him powerless." She looked at Theo. He stared at the ground, but his shoulders straightened. They were wrong. Power is not the same as money. Power is what remains when money fails to silence you. The applause came slowly at first, then fully. Theo leaned toward her and whispered, "Mom would say that was too fancy." Nora laughed softly. She would be right. That evening, after the crowd left, Nora found Theo in the small garden behind the center. Marigolds lined the path. A bronze plaque bore Rosa's name beneath Gabriel's. Theo stood with his hands in his pockets. "You okay?" Nora asked, then caught herself. He smirked, "Window open or closed?" "Exactly." He looked at the flowers, "Open." Nora stood beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then Theo said, "Do you think he remembers them?" "Victor." Theo nodded, "My mom, your dad." Nora thought carefully. Victor was awaiting trial in a private facility he despised because privacy was no longer something he controlled. His lawyers still filed motions. His remaining supporters still called him a visionary. Men like Victor often mistook consequence for persecution. "I think he remembers what they cost him," Nora said. "I don't know if he understands who they were." Theo considered that. "Then he still lost," he said. "Yes," Nora replied. "He lost everything that could have taught him to be human." Theo looked at her then, and for once, the sadness in his eyes did not look older than he was. Inside the center, Myra laughed with Mara, who had become the kind of aunt every child deserves, strict about documents, soft about cookies. The sound floated through the open door. Nora watched Theo listen to it. The boy who had entered the courthouse mocked, and barefoot now stood in a garden built because he had refused to disappear. He had not buried an empire alone. Rosa had carried the first shovel. Gabriel had left the map. Myra had triggered the door. Nora had finally turned the key. And Victor Blackwell, who once believed the world belonged to whoever could buy the silence, learned the truth too late. The poorest person in the room had not needed his permission to matter. The wife he abandoned had not needed his name to rise. The baby he denied had not needed his love to inherit the future. And the empire he built from stolen trust did not fall because one enemy attacked it. It fell because every invisible person he had stepped over was, in the end, holding up the floor beneath him. When they finally moved into Nora's restored family home outside the city, the house was smaller than the mansion and warmer than any palace. The old workshop still stood behind it, dusty, damaged, waiting. Nora unlocked it on Myra's first birthday. Theo helped push open the door. Sunlight entered like it had been waiting years. The workbench was still there. So were faint paint marks on the floor from Nora's childhood. She found a tiny bird scratched into the underside of a shelf and smiled. "What is it?" Theo asked. "My father," she said, still leaving windows open. Myra clapped at nothing, delighted by dust in the light. Nora set her daughter on a blanket and opened the wooden marigold box. Inside, she placed 3 things: Gabriel's pencil, Rosa's copied notes, and the hospital bracelet that had almost become the symbol of Myra's erasure. Then she added one more thing. The white dress. The one Victor had called too simple for a billionaire's wife. She folded it carefully, not as a relic of shame, but as proof. Proof that she had walked into the courthouse expecting humiliation and walked out carrying a war older than her marriage. Proof that simplicity was not weakness. Proof that a woman could be underestimated, abandoned, publicly mocked, and still become the storm no empire survived. Theo watched her close the box. "Are you going to keep it forever?" he asked. "No," Nora said. "Someday Myra may ask where her story began. I want to tell her the truth. That her father was terrible." Nora looked at her daughter, who had found Gabriel's old measuring tape and was trying very seriously to eat the end of it. "That her father made terrible choices," Nora said, "that many people were hurt, that brave people helped save her, and that she was never the scandal." Theo nodded slowly. "What was she?" Nora smiled. "The key." Years later, people would still tell the courthouse story incorrectly. They would make it cleaner, louder, more glamorous. They would say Nora destroyed Victor Blackwell in a single day. They would say Theo Reyes came from nowhere. They would say Celeste betrayed him out of jealousy. They would say Myra inherited an empire because of a legal technicality. But Nora knew better. Nothing true comes from nowhere. A father's warning can sleep inside a forgotten video for 20 years. A mother's courage can hide in a flash drive tucked into a torn jacket. A child's birth can awaken a buried clause. A mistress can become a witness. A courtroom can become a battlefield. A mocked boy can become the messenger no billionaire prepared for. And a woman arriving in a simple white dress, holding a newborn and divorce papers, can discover that she is not walking into the end of her life. She is walking into the first honest chapter. On the anniversary of the day everything changed, Nora returned to the courthouse steps. Not for a hearing, not for Victor. His trial had ended months earlier with convictions that finally made newspapers use words his money once kept away from him. Fraud, conspiracy, tampering, theft. She came because Theo asked. He stood on the same marble step where reporters had laughed and guards had reached for him. He was taller now, his hair trimmed, his jacket clean, but his expression carried the memory of that day. Nora stood beside him, with Myra on her hip. "Do you hate this place?" she asked. Theo thought about it. "I hated everyone in it," he said, "for a while. And now..." He looked at the doors. "Now I think this is where they heard me." Nora nodded. The courthouse doors opened and closed as people came and went, carrying folders, fears, arguments, hopes. Some wore expensive suits, some wore uniforms, some looked lost, some looked dangerous, most looked tired. Theo reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. The cracked phone. It no longer worked. The screen had gone black months ago. The recordings had been copied, authenticated, preserved. The phone was useless now as evidence. But not as memory. "I want to put it in the center," he said, "in the display case, with Mom's badge." Nora smiled. "I think that's where it belongs." Myra reached for it, babbling. Theo held it out of reach. "No, tiny boss, this is historical." Nora laughed. For a moment, sunlight flashed against the courthouse windows, and Nora saw their reflections. Herself, no longer Mrs. Blackwell, Theo, no longer invisible, Myra, no longer denied. Behind them, the city moved on. But beneath that movement, something remained changed. The story had entered people like a warning. Hospitals reviewed records. Law firms reconsidered what loyalty meant. Boards questioned founders who treated companies like kingdoms. Reporters learned to watch the people security tried to remove from the frame. And somewhere, perhaps, a cleaning woman working late in an office where powerful people spoke too freely remembered Rosa Reyes and turned on her phone. Somewhere, a wife reading frozen bank notices realized control was not love. Somewhere, a child no one listened to held proof and decided to speak anyway. Nora kissed Myra's forehead. "Ready to go home?" she asked. Theo looked once more at the courthouse. Then he nodded. As they walked away, Nora felt the old ache and the new strength living side by side inside her. She no longer expected healing to erase memory. Healing, she had learned, was not forgetting the fire. It was building windows into the house that survived it. At the corner, Theo paused. Mrs. Hartwell. Nora smiled. He still used the name formally when he was about to say something important. Yes. Do you ever wish I came sooner? The question struck gently but deeply. Nora looked at him, at the boy who had carried too much and still believed timing was his burden. No, she said, I wish the world had protected you sooner. That is not the same thing. He looked down. She touched his shoulder. The day you came was the day you could, and that was enough. Theo nodded, and this time he believed her a little faster. They crossed the street together. Not as a rescued woman, a homeless boy, and a denied child. As a family made by truth. Behind them, the courthouse stood cold and grand, still full of secrets waiting for courage. Ahead of them, the city opened wide.